What actually is DigiBC?
DigiBC is the industry association for digital media and wireless companies of British Columbia. It's a nonprofit organization, and we help support and promote the industry here locally as well as globally. And we also ensure that our industry is sustainable and competitive on a global basis, because all of the products that are developed in our industry are distributed to a global audience, and it's important that we're competitive, and if we're not, it causes issues.
So what's, on the face of it, it sounds like DigiBC has a lot in common with groups like the IGDA or like the kind of more, almost like the unions, right? What is actually the difference there, like between a group like DigiBC or say the ESA or groups like that?
Well, I'd have to say we probably have more of a business focus to the industry. We also support a lot of creative initiatives. I mean, I started GDC Canada here, which we attracted 800 to 900 people. But we also really look at what we can do to actually grow the industry from a business perspective here, so people have, great jobs and futures, and young people coming out of universities can obtain jobs here. And so it's a little bit more of a business focus, and I think we've been pretty successful with that.
Right. So you'd say that, to be clear, you're specifically focused on the industry in British Columbia?
Yes, we are focused on the industry in British Columbia, but we also do a lot of trade initiatives on a global basis. I've been to India, Korea, China, Brazil, because there's a lot of other countries that want to work with our industry here. Vancouver and British Columbia are known on a global basis, and so our presence in these other territories is very important. So at GDC, there's a big presence, so we play a big role down there, and other conferences. And as I say, it's really important to get our industry aware of what's going on in the global markets, and then they can be more successful.
Do you have any sense of how the rest of the world views Vancouver, as a potential partner?
I would say it's viewed very positively. When I first set up my game company called Propaganda Games, and of course I worked for Disney in Los Angeles. I knew a lot of the people there, and I knew how they make decisions and how they operate. But I attended one meeting, and I proposed setting up a game company here and working with them. And the meeting lasted about an hour and a half, included the CEO and 15 people on his executive team. And at the end of the meeting, he said, "Just tell me what you want to do, and we'll do it." And I think that's a testament to the fact that they really have confidence in the people here and the quality games that are generated from this location. Otherwise, I think they probably would have wanted to do some more due diligence.
Right. So now let's get into the talk of this tax credit specifically. Now I don't know all the details. What is the nature of this credit that's been in place now since 2009?
The tax credit was put in place in October 1st of 2010, but of course we started our initiative in 2008 at the depths of the economic downturn, and of course the closure of several studios here, many people losing their jobs, many people actually leaving the province, people who were trained here, professionals who were trained here and leaving for Washington, California, Florida, other parts of Canada, and so there was a lot of soul searching then about what we should do, and we realized, well, there's 21 digital media tax credits in the U.S. There's 6 digital media tax credits in Canada, and that's actually moving jobs. People that have been trained here, and companies that have set up here, they're moving their operations out of here, and it's also having an economic impact to the BC government in terms of tax revenues that they collect. And the organization that I was with at the time, New Media BC, had tried a couple times to put a policy in place, but it really didn't get anywhere. So I arranged to meet with 10 people from the industry executives here. We formed a group, we raised some money, And we met with the BC government, found out what does it take to get a competitive tax policy here, because we want to grow the industry. We don't want it to decline. And so they told us that, well, first of all, they shared the information that they had about the industry, and of course, it really wasn't accurate, but I had no data to support that because no one keeps track of the size of our industry or the impact that it has. So we had to initiate a survey and do an economic impact about what is the effect of the industry. And when we shared that information with the government, we worked together on establishing a policy, and it was announced just before the Olympics.
Yeah. So, there's been a lot of talk about where the BC government kind of stands in regards to all the different media kind of enterprises happening in Vancouver, right? Like there was a whole Save BC film and stuff. A lot of people feel like the government doesn't really appreciate the film industry here. Do you think the government appreciates the interactive industry here?
I think the BC government does appreciate the digital media industry. It's actually amazing that they put a tax policy in place for us only after working on it for 8 months. I know that seems like an eternity to some people, but it takes a lot of work to put a policy in place. And so I really feel like they do appreciate the industry. Obviously I'd like to see a larger tax credit because I think it will create significantly more jobs here, like what we've seen with Sony ImageWorks moving their entire animation group up here to Vancouver. And when you look at what's happened with Ubisoft in Quebec, they probably have about 3,000 people, and they started with under 100 people not too long ago. And so tax credits have a huge impact in creating jobs and building a strong global industry in video games. They're very effective.
So how the other, because other provinces have their own kind of tax credits and tax incentives for game companies that want to go and move there, right? And there's been an impact on our industry a little bit, right? Like groups like Rockstar Vancouver have kind of up and moved to other provinces. So what do I guess what I'm asking is, how do our kind of tax incentives and things compare to the other provinces? Like what's different, what's similar?
The tax credits in general are based on development labor. So it's a percentage of development labor. And the tax credits go anywhere from, generally 30 to 40% of development labor. Here in BC, the tax credit is 17.5% of development labor. So, it's lower than the other provinces, but it's been very effective in creating jobs here and having foreign companies invest here because of all the other attributes that BC has. So, companies aren't going to move an operation here just because of the tax credits. The first thing they're going to look at is the labor pool. They're going to look at any gaps there are. What universities are there here? So, for example, there's the Center for Digital Media that has a Masters of Digital Media program. That attracts companies here. Just the culture here. Being on the West Coast is a huge advantage because most of the video games are developed on the West Coast, in Washington, California, and of course in British Columbia. So, but tax credits are now a very important component of that, and people in high positions in global companies make their decisions based on the factors I just mentioned, including the tax credits. And because BC instituted a tax credit program, DNA from Japan, which is a $1 billion company located here, Greed located here, Bandai Namco, and many other companies have located here. There have been what I would call independent startup companies like Roadhouse Interactive that started with 3 people and now has upwards of 150 people. And at one point, they actually said, they were thinking of shutting their doors, but because of the tax credit, they decided to stay in business and become a success. So the tax credit has been very effective at really supporting the industry, and I have to thank the BC government for actually putting it in place. And not only that, it's not really a cost to the government, it actually provides a tax surplus. based on the analysis that we've done. So it doesn't cost the taxpayers really any money.
So what's happening in February then? Because my understanding is that there's some serious stuff is about to go down in regards to this tax credit, right? There is like a meeting about it. There's going to be an announcement made. What is actually happening in February?
Well, the current tax credit that is in place has a 5-year sunset clause. So it expires September 30th of 2015. The government is announcing their new fiscal budget in February, and they will be making a decision regarding this tax credit on, whether they can extend it, they could let it, cease, not be in effect anymore, or they could make some changes to it. I mean, basically, the tax credit policy is very well written, easy to administer, and this would be probably a great time to make a few refinements to it. They could do that. And in February, that's when we'll find out what they plan to do about that. And they are looking at it seriously.
Okay, so we're going to take a little bit of a break right now. We'll talk more about this and about other cool stuff from your awesome career right after the break, so do not go away. Okay, welcome back, guys. Here we are, very exciting. Howard Donaldson. We were just talking about the tax credit that the BC government has been, is the right word providing, or what verb should I be using there?
Well, it's a tax policy.
Unleashing. Yeah.
Extending the digital media tax policy.
Yeah. So maybe it's useful to actually talk a bit about the game industry, right? Like, you in your work doing these surveys and stuff, you have a lot of statistical information about the industry in Canada and in BC and in the world, right? So how large is the industry in BC specifically? Like how big of a game industry do we have here?
Well, in BC is the number 2 province in terms of video game development in Canada. And Canada is actually 3rd in the world for developing video games and number 1 on a per capita basis. So the video game industry is very strategic for Canada on an overall basis. We employ, according to my estimate, in terms of direct development, 4,600 people in the industry here. And it's been growing at 9% a year for the last 5 years. Generates about, $700 million in terms of GDP. It's considered one of the hubs in the world, and it really all goes back to when Distinctive Software decided to sell to EA. And while I was at EA, we actually created the largest interactive studio in the world. I mean, that's really hard to believe that we created that here. But we did that really based on about 4 or 5 franchises. We invested in a lot of other franchises as well. So it, just from that alone, and of course, now we have over 140 game companies here. It's, it has a fairly big presence. And if you look at globally the video game industry, it's almost twice the size of the global film box office at $66 billion. That's according to PricewaterhouseCoopers, and there are other forecasts out there that have it actually rated much higher. It's the fastest growing entertainment sector, and now a lot of these game companies and people who have been trained in these companies are now moving into other sectors such as education, training, healthcare. So it's pretty exciting. Virtual reality. We've got one company here that's using the Oculus virtual reality platform to train surgeons before they actually go into an actual surgery and operate on somebody.
Well, even beyond video games themselves, if you think about the term gamification, right? That's become a huge kind of buzzword, but a huge trend in almost every industry. Right, like there's people looking to gamify, how your workout schedule or how you work at your job or whatever. It is funny that, the game industry, like so many people don't even, maybe in the 80s, they were like, yes, Mario, fantastic. Those are great. Those aren't for me. And then they blink, and now, $66 billion industry, right? Larger than film, larger than these things that a lot of people seem to be under the impression, like Avatar, right? This huge film made $1 billion. And it's like, $1 billion. Well, that's nothing to us, right? That's cute that you made $1 billion. But I'm also wondering, like you mentioned EA, and you worked at EA. Would you say? Because it seems like every development studio in Vancouver that's above a certain size, there's ex EA employees there. Like it seems like EA has played this huge role just in that they employed so many people. Like they almost like created the industry, right?
Well, they did, and they've spawned. What's really happened is over time, they've spawned a whole bunch of new industries and created the subsector. I mean, we're really fortunate to have them here. And I believe that with the right tax credit policy and other things in place, we could replicate that with other companies. And there's so much opportunity in the industry, and we can bring that right here to British Columbia. We have thousands of people that were trained here that are working elsewhere right now. I mean, if I just look at Propaganda Games alone, when the studio was shut down, many of those people are now working at Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And another game company that closed down here, many of those people are now working for Zynga.
Right.
Those people would rather really be here.
But they had to move.
Well, they had the opportunity to move.
Right.
I mean, I guess they could have stayed here and waited for a job to open up, but most people want to be employed right away. And of course, because there's so many opportunities in the industry, they did move. And it wasn't just one person that moved; a group of people moved. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what happens in this industry. So those people, we could bring those people home by bringing those opportunities back here.
Yeah. You know what? Let's talk about Propaganda, because you in what were you the head of Propaganda? What? I don't actually. I'm sorry. I don't. Actually
I was one of the founders of Propaganda.
Okay,
I set up the relationship with Disney Interactive because I worked for Disney when I was in Los Angeles, and when we formed the transaction, I actually became vice president of studio operations for all of Disney Interactive. Yeah. So I oversaw several studios and helped set up studios, such as in Austin, Texas, and Shanghai, Chicago, Salt Lake City, and several other locations. And I also oversaw Propaganda Games as well.
So Propaganda. I mean, I'm sure virtually everybody watching has heard of Propaganda, but for me, and you tell me if you can't talk about this, but like Propaganda, like whenever I think of Propaganda, I think of the Pirates of the Caribbean game that you guys were working on. That, I mean, it looked fantastic. I didn't get a chance to play it myself, but it seemed fantastic, and I know that many. Among game journalists, there was a huge kind of wave of complete and utter sadness, just that we weren't going to be able to play this game that was coming out, right? Like, what can you tell us about the process of how you guys came to work on that game, and what actually, I mean, as much as you can say about what actually the downward spiral?
Well, I mean, we pitched that game. I mean, we pitched several games, because Disney has so many properties. There's really many properties we could have worked on. But that's one property that the team was very excited to work on, and they're pretty far along in the development. But, they still had a long ways to go. It was an expensive game. I can't really comment on, why it was shut down. It's unfortunate that it was, but, that decision was made for probably good reasons to some people, not for good reasons to the people that lost their jobs over it. And it's a great, Pirates of the Caribbean is certainly a great opportunity, and we'd like the opportunity to work on that again. But, because we were working for the Walt Disney Company, we had lots of properties that, other properties we could have worked on as well.
So after Propaganda was shut down, where did you move on from there? Where did you end up finding yourself?
Well, I was encouraged to run the DigiBC, the digital media industry. It needed help at the time, and so I decided to take that job. I also was CEO in residence for the Center for Growth, so I consulted with about 15 digital media and video game companies. I actually helped some of them grow into major, fairly large studios. And I also became a partner in Vantage Capital, which is a $137 million fund here that invests in digital media and software technology companies.
Well, my goodness, that's very exciting. But what's interesting to me, though, is because we were talking a little bit before we started shooting. It's all very interesting, but what's specifically interesting to me is that while you were at Propaganda, you were actually involved in that process you were talking about with the kind of the 8 months of I guess, lobbying for this tax credit, right? So you were actually already involved in the politics of the industry before being a part of DigiBC, right? So was the opportunity to be a part of DigiBC, was that like in some ways like a dream come true, or was that more like? Well,
I was on the board for DigiBC.
Okay.
But I wasn't involved in the politics at all. I mean, I sat on the board, I was active, but I really wasn't involved in public policy. I really wasn't meeting with the BC government. But while I was working for Disney, I explored the tax credits in Ontario and in Quebec and Georgia and Michigan and Texas and in Utah. I actually helped put a policy in place for our studio there, even though they didn't have a digital media tax credit. They used a number of credits that were in place to put one in place for the studio there. So I had an understanding for other policies that were in place that probably helped me in terms of dealing with the issues here. I mean, every location, the politics are different. So what I had to learn was, how does BC operate? How do they make decisions? What sort of information do they need?
And what did you discover?
Well, I discovered that they actually need a lot of information and they need good reasons for putting this policy in place. So they need economic data to show that it makes business sense, and they need to know that it makes sense for the people of British Columbia to have something like this in place. And I firmly believe that, once we captured all this information, as I mentioned before, it really does make a lot of sense to support an industry like this. It's growing, it supports our young people. People, on average, make twice the amount of money they would if they were, making an average wage. It actually creates a lot of benefits. And the tax credit really, even though it's 17.5%, the companies have to give up it's called SHRED, but it's an R&D tax credit. And so the net credit is actually only about 9%, and that 9% is only applied to the direct labor. It's not applied to management, not applied to contractors, it's not applied to admin, it's not applied to marketing. So in reality, it's a very effective tax credit for this province.